All right, let's just dive right in and pop the hood on some of the world's most successful companies to see how they actually achieve market dominance. Have you ever wondered why some massive corporations just seamlessly adapt and thrive for decades, while others completely crash and burn the second there's a little market disruption? Well, today in this explainer, we are unpacking the actual science behind corporate survival.
And we're starting with a real high-stakes crisis. Picture this. It's the early 1990s, and tech giant IBM is on the brink of absolute disaster. They were bleeding cash, facing rapidly declining revenues, and just bleeding market share to aggressive new competitors. Internally, their systems were totally outdated, their culture was incredibly rigid and bureaucratic, and they were frankly obsessively relying on physical hardware right when the rest of the world was pivoting towards software and services.
So, it begs the question. When the walls are literally closing in, how do massive companies not just survive but eventually thrive? They can't just slap on a new logo or run a flashy ad campaign. They have to fundamentally tear down their internal engines, inspect every single moving part, and rebuild for the future.
To show you how they do that, we're handing you the ultimate strategic toolkit today. We'll quickly run through 1. Looking inward with organizational analysis. 2. The 9 steps to success. 3. Resources and core competencies. 4. The VRIO framework. And finally, 5. Value chain analysis.
Okay, starting with Section 1, looking inward organizational analysis. Let's see why this internal audit is step 1 for saving any struggling business.
When we say we're doing an organizational analysis, we're basically doing a full-body scan of the company's internal environment. We're tuning out the broader economy for a second, and we are strictly diagnosing internal structure, everyday processes, corporate culture, and human resources. We really want to answer 2 fundamental things here. What exact resources and capabilities does this organization have, and how can we use them more effectively to actually get an edge on the competition?
This inward look is exactly how IBM pulled off their legendary turnaround. Their CEO at the time, Louis Gerstner Jr., didn't just guess what to fix. He ran a massive organizational analysis. And what did he find? Over-centralized decision-making and a totally siloed culture. So he took action. He shifted the entire company away from hardware and turned them into a solutions and services provider. He reorganized into customer-centric units, forced teams to collaborate, and ultimately transformed IBM into a dominant IT consulting leader. It is a masterclass in internal strategy.
Moving right along to Section 2, 9 steps to success. Now that we know why this matters, let's talk about the specific how.
The source material actually breaks this process down into 9 specific steps, but honestly, it's a lot easier to digest if we compress them into 4 logical phases. First is diagnostics. What exactly are we trying to solve, and what data do we need? Then comes analysis, looking hard at both the internal structures and external market forces. Third is evaluation. This is the critical part where you hunt for gaps between where you are and where you want to be, usually leaning on tools like a SWOT analysis to map out strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And finally, action. You make the recommendations, launch the plan, and meticulously track the results.
All right, Section 3, resources and core competencies. Once we have our data, we need to map out the foundational building blocks of the firm.
A huge takeaway here is that resources are way more than just the cash you have in the bank. If we look at the resource-based view of strategy, resources basically fall into 3 buckets. You've got your tangible resources. Think physical assets like Walmart's massive, hyper-efficient distribution centers. Then, intangible resources, the non-physical stuff, like Apple's bulletproof brand reputation and their patented designs. And finally, human resources, the literal brain power of your employees, like the army of data scientists Google uses to keep their search algorithms miles ahead of everyone else.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how we separate an internal skill from its real-world external outcome. When you combine those resources we just talked about, you create a core competency, something your company is just uniquely brilliant at. Take Honda, for example. Their core competency is their legendary mastery of engine design. But listen, an internal skill is totally useless unless it creates a competitive advantage out there in the market. For Honda, that internal engine expertise externally translates into selling wildly efficient, super reliable cars that customers actively choose over rivals.
Which brings us to Section 4, the VRIO framework. This is where we test if those internal resources actually give you a lasting edge.
Think of VRIO as a ruthless, high-stakes decision tree for your business assets. You evaluate every resource across 4 hurdles. First, is it valuable? If no, you're at a competitive disadvantage right out of the gate. Second, is it rare?
If it's valuable, but everyone has it, you're just at competitive parity. Third, is it difficult to imitate? If someone can easily copy it, your advantage is only temporary. To hit the holy grail, a sustained competitive advantage, you need all four. It has to be valuable, rare, super hard to copy, and your company must be structurally organized to actually exploit it.
Let's ground this with some heavy hitters. Amazon passes the value test with flying colors. Their logistics network guarantees speed, which neutralizes threats and locks in customers. Tesla, especially in the early days, completely nailed rarity because almost no one else had their level of EV battery tech. Coca-Cola? They effortlessly passed the imitatability test. Between their secret formula and over a century of cultural history, good luck trying to accurately replicate that. And Apple aces the organization test. Their entire leadership, culture, and structure are perfectly aligned to take their rare design talent and translate it directly into total market dominance.
Finally, we reach Section 5, Value Chain Analysis. This is where we shift from looking at static resources to evaluating your day-to-day operations.
Michael Porter introduced this framework, and it is a fantastic way to see how everyday activities actually build value for the end customer. He splits the business straight down the middle. On one side, you have primary activities, the literal hands-on work, getting materials in, making the product, shipping it out, marketing it, and providing customer service. On the other side, you have support activities, the back-end stuff that keeps the lights on and the engine running, like HR, IT development, and company infrastructure.
And the companies that master the links between these activities, they absolutely win the market. Look at Toyota. They are the gold standard for inbound logistics using their just-in-time system to totally slash costs. Amazon is the undisputed king of outbound logistics. Nobody beats their delivery speed. Google proves that support activities are just as crucial, heavily investing in HR to foster a culture of nonstop innovation. And Dell sets itself apart in that final primary activity, service, by using top-tier technical support to lock in customer loyalty for life. Breaking your business down like this shows you exactly where to trim the fat and where to double down.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today in this explainer. You now have a strategic toolkit to diagnose literally any business, from mapping the internal core competencies to running the VRIO gauntlet to dissecting the value chain. But it all leaves us with one final critical question for you to ponder. When you look at your own organization or even the companies you invest in, are those internal capabilities just ordinary and easy to copy? Or are they uniquely organized, remarkably rare, and truly inimitable? Because let me tell you, your answer to that question is the difference between just surviving and achieving lasting market dominance.